Hi, and welcome to Healthcare IT Today. This is Colin Hung, editor, and today I'm joined by Robert Kaul, founder and CEO of Cloud DX. Robert, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Colin.
Robert, maybe you can give the audience a quick overview of what Cloud DX does.
Sure. Cloud DX is a digital healthcare company, and we have created a platform that includes all the pieces of technology you need to do a very thorough job of virtual care. So caring for patients, caring for folks outside of the four walls of a hospital or a clinic. And so what that means is we invent our own medical devices that people can use in their homes to gather all their vital signs. We have a mobile app that goes on your smartphone or a tablet that you interact with to connect with your clinician or your caregiver or even your family. And then we have a clinical dashboard that allows doctors and nurses to monitor hundreds, potentially thousands of patients at one time and to be notified if something changes with those patients in their home. And then the last piece of that puzzle is some really smart software that pays attention to data coming in, vital signs, survey answers, things like that, and will then flag and will notify clinicians if something has changed.
Now, I've had the privilege of actually trying some of your devices when we last saw each other, back when we could see each other in person. I tried the devices. It's very unique, very comfortable, if you will, and meant to be used by patients at home. And of course, before the pandemic happened, care at home was sort of starting to trend upwards. This was something that people had begun to kind of go, you know what, this really makes a lot of sense. And then the pandemic hit, and I think in some ways it's made it even more important and more popular now. What's been your experience about the pandemic's impact on this care at home movement? Has it improved it? Has it hurt it? What are your thoughts there, Robert?
I mean, it's a massive change. Back in February and especially early March, a bunch of things happened all at once. Hospital systems and doctors' offices closed down. They stopped all surgeries except for life-saving surgeries, so any elective surgery ground to a halt. And it simply became impossible for people to even go to the doctor. And then if you needed to go to the hospital, the only time you wanted to do that is if you absolutely had to, if there was no other choice. So all over the world, but especially in North America, the whole healthcare system switched to a remote model of care. And the powers that be, the regulators, they removed a bunch of restrictions around billing and reimbursement for virtual care and telemedicine, being able to talk to a doctor by phone or by video or even text message in some cases. And then they started looking for more and more ways to empower patients to receive care at home and to get better care at home, both to reduce the burden on the healthcare system and also to keep people as socially distant and isolated and safe as possible. So I imagine in some ways we have seen nearly a 10 times increase in the level of business we've been doing since March on patients we've been interacting with and covering with our platform, and on the number of systems that we've shipped out to the world and that kind of thing. Frankly, it's not slowing down anytime soon.
So it sounds like the pandemic has actually encouraged more people to try this care at home thing, and in some cases, it sounds like it's forced them into that world, whether they liked it or not.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of that exact thing. Like, unfortunately, though, what has happened is a lot of people are postponing care because maybe they don't even know that there's a remote option that available to them, and so that postponement of care is a bad thing. Definitely, it puts patients at risk. Those patients who are offered the option of embracing virtual care by their physicians have jumped on it, and so far, a lot of the stats that are coming out is that people really, really like it.
I was just going to ask that actually. What's been the acceptance of these kinds of devices that do remote patient monitoring at home and having these, I won't call it DIY because it's not quite that, but having access to these devices at home? Have people been pretty accepting that, hey, I get to use this stuff now, or has it been like really complicated and daunting for them?
Well, in the case of Cloud DX, one of our specialties is we deliver a set of devices that are very easy to use, and our patients do really, really like using our devices. And we know that because we have academic proof. Studies have been done through universities that have found 100% of Cloud DX patients have said that they really enjoy using our technology. So we score very highly on that front. I think that in general, also, for the most part, whether you're using a smartphone or a tablet and then using a relatively simple device like a blood pressure cuff or a pulse oximeter, really almost anybody can find a way to do that without too much work and too much struggle. At this point, we're not asking patients to take their own X-rays or anything too crazy like that. So I think that it really is opening up whole new avenues because people are now starting to ask, well, what else can I do? That's a kind of a neat thing we're seeing.
And is simplicity, in your mind, one of the biggest barriers, or are there any other barriers to further adoption of this kind of technology at home?
Well, I think there's three things that need to happen. I think that in the first place, patients need to have a good experience. The more that happens, the more likely it is they'll want to keep trying it. If people are frustrated or they're having a bad experience, it makes it much less likely they're going to try it in the future. I think secondly that doctors and nurses, the clinicians themselves, need to see it actually work. Folks in that business are very conservative. They're not known to embracing wild and crazy new ideas. But the pandemic is forcing everybody into a new mode. And now that that's starting to work for both the clinicians and the patients, that then kind of also resets the button, and it gives clinicians a chance to say, hey, this is working for us too. We should keep doing this. So that's the second thing. And I think the third thing is that the payers, the governments in the government payment models and the insurance companies, if they're also seeing benefits, whether that's happier customers, happier patients, or frankly, lower costs overall, which is really part of the promise of virtual care, then you kind of have that perfect storm where everybody realizes, hey, this is just better. And at that point, we can take the name virtual off of it, and it just becomes care.
I mean, that is the goal, right? Whether it's virtual, I mean, one day that the virtual moniker gets dropped, it's just care, however the patient and provider want to be able to provide it, right? And that's pretty interesting. You mentioned the physician side. That isn't something we hear about a lot when it comes to at-home or remote patient monitoring. What have you found on that side, Robert, in terms of the acceptance of this technology and the use of it?
Well, clinicians are very much gatekeepers. And a good example is if you go to your doctor's office and you have a very detailed spreadsheet you printed out of all your Fitbit readings you've taken over the last 16 months, your physician will be, they will commend you for your efforts, but they really can't take that information into account very easily. And so they probably won't do much with it just because that's not how they practice. So one of the biggest challenges to changing the models of care are changing clinical workflows. And as the pandemic has forced clinical workflows to become more and more virtual, that's a hard change to retreat from. So more than anything, that clinician, not just acceptance, but embrace of virtual care is one of the biggest stories in the last 6 months.
Yeah, again, what is that? When needs is the, or when the need is there, people will just adapt, right? And that seems to be what's happening right now with the pandemic. It's forcing them to think about virtual when before they probably didn't give it a second thought.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. People have known about virtual care and they've watched it happen in pilot projects, and they think it's been the coming thing for several years now. But yeah, when the rubber meets the road and you're going to work every day, the real question is like, how can I make it work for myself, or how can I make it work in my practice? And unless there's some real motivator to make you change the way you do business, especially in a very conservative business like healthcare, then it's harder to sort of move that iceberg. But that I think is what's really changed. And now, the pace of change is also exciting, just because it shows what's possible. It was always assumed that it would take many months or many years for clinicians and regulators to kind of finally get comfortable and accept risks. So, and then when the pandemic came along, things changed literally overnight. In days, we saw things happen in days that we thought would take years. We saw academic projects approved that would normally take 2 years to be funded and approved by ethics boards, and we saw all of that roll out literally in 6 weeks. And everyone is just marveling. And once you see that that's possible, then you have to ask yourself, well, why did it take 2 years in the first place? Why can't we do things and innovate in a little bit more of an embrace of innovation manner and do things faster. And that may be a bigger story down the road. Is not just what's happening, but how it's happening, in my opinion.
Well, I think you and every other health IT solution provider out there would hope that this spirit of innovation and adaptivity, I guess, or adaptability is maintained well into the future years, and we don't sort of revert back to the perhaps conservative approach, as people would call it, that we've had in the years past, where it took much longer. That curve of adoption is much slower. So now you mentioned academic partnership and research. I know for a fact that you've actually recently teamed with a local university to do a new study or some new study. Can you give us a preview of what that is?
Yeah, I sure can, and it's actually very exciting. So this is something that happened with a group of scientists who work at McMaster University in Hamilton, along with physicians at Hamilton Health Sciences and a group called the Population Health Research Center, which is one of the preeminent institutes around the world for studying healthcare in large groups of folks. And they have been studying and modeling how people recover from surgery for actually some time now, for several years. It's an important part of, it's an important place to study, because one of the places where there still is a lot of sort of lack of data is what happens when a patient goes home after surgery. For the most part, doctors, they don't really have any information. People go home, hopefully they get better. If they don't get better, they wind up back in the emergency room, and now we have to try and figure out what happened to them. So the idea of monitoring patients after surgery in their home with a sophisticated array of devices has really sort of interested these scientists for some time now. The pandemic came along again, and sort of now suddenly, not only can people not come into the hospital, but you have to get them out of the hospital as fast as possible. So there was a real desire to send people home even a little earlier than you normally would have, which meant you had to monitor them very closely. So our technology was adopted by this group across 7 hospitals in Canada, and we enrolled in record time. We enrolled over 1,000 patients in this project called PVC-RAM, RAM. And that's a complicated acronym. The RAM part stands for Remote Automated Monitoring. But in any case, what happened with these folks is they were sent home with our kit of devices and our tablet with our app on it. And then nurses followed them very closely, 24 hours a day, once they got home. They took their vital signs many times a day. They answered survey questions. And if they had any challenges, they could reach out immediately, talk to the nurse. The nurse could jump on the video conference part of our solution and have a quick Zoom video and immediately diagnose what was happening with these folks. And so the good news is that anecdotally, there were a number of stories of patients who were getting into trouble with their recovery. They were having infections, or they were having other challenges. And because of this immediate and rapid intervention, they were actually brought back to the hospital very quickly. And in some cases, potentially their lives were saved because of that quick intervention. And overall, it looks like the data that was gathered on this 1,000-patient cohort is going to be a very powerful indicator of how effective monitoring patients post-surgery is really going to be in the future.
Wow, that sounds pretty exciting. I look forward to seeing the results of that. I can also imagine that perhaps it will relieve some burden on the healthcare system by, I guess, some people who may think they need to come in, but maybe they don't, after speaking with the nurse, or just after someone looks at the data constantly going, yep, you know what, everything's normal, it's okay, a little bit of pain is okay, or whatever the case is, and actually not having them come in to the ED just to check in.
It's that may happen for sure, but what's actually a better outcome is to catch something that normally you wouldn't think would necessarily make you feel like you had to come in right away. And so what I mean by that is our instruments and sensors, they may catch the fact that you have a growing infection or that something has gone wrong, even before you feel bad about it.
Gotcha.
And the tricky part is that most of us, we would rather not go back to the hospital. So we will delay as long as possible that idea. Like, I don't want to go back. I just don't want to go back. I'm just going to stay home. I'm going to be fine. I'll be fine. Just give me another aspirin. I'll be good. And the problem is that if you leave it too long, when you finally do drag yourself back there, now you're in such bad shape that they have to readmit you to hospital. You go back in the hospital. That's where the extra cost comes in. So if I could catch this really early and I bring you back for just a quick visit to the ER, and it's like, yep, we need to give you a stronger antibiotic, or we need to redo something in your sutures, like just something that we can intervene very rapidly and then send you home again. I've avoided that readmission, and that has saved you a lot of pain and anguish, and also saved the healthcare system many, many, many thousands of dollars. So that's where it's more efficient and where everybody starts to win.
Well, it brings you back to the point you made before around people are reluctant to come in with COVID right now, and they're foregoing their care or delaying their care. You can imagine that how dangerous that could be post-surgery if you do have something wrong and you just go, you don't want to go into the hospital for any reason, so you delay it. And as you said, it could get a lot worse than if you did go in. So that's very interesting. Great point. As you look around the horizon, Robert, what are you seeing in terms of the future for care at home? I mean, in general, not just for Cloud DX, but just sort of in general for the industry. What are you seeing? What are you getting excited about? What should people be aware of that's heading towards us?
Well, I think that success breeds success, and this is the interesting part about a sea change. As people not only experience virtual care for themselves, but they hear about friends and family members who have a good experience with virtual care, people say to themselves, well, I want virtual care too. Why do I have to go and sit in a kind of a waiting room for an hour where a bunch of sick people coughing around me, and if to spend 10 minutes with a clinician and get a prescription? Why can't I just have that conversation on my kitchen table? So, the bigger story here for us is that the more people who use virtual care, the more people who are going to want to use virtual care. And this virtual cycle starts to grow and grow and grow. And then as long as clinicians are happy with it and the payers are happy with it, and so everyone's benefiting, then it may turn out that within 2 to 3 to 4 years, we're surprised when we do finally have to go. It's like, what do you mean I have to go to the doctor? Really? That might mean it's something pretty serious, It's
Right.
like, wow, which would make it more likely that you would be compliant to that instruction. So if the doctor, the clinician that you're talking to by Zoom says, no, I really need you to come in, it's like, oh boy, I better get my butt in there, because they wouldn't say that unless it was serious. So again, it's just a better way to deliver care overall. And I think that's very, very exciting for all of us, frankly.
And what's next for Cloud DX? What are some of the things that you can tell us what you're working on?
Well, so we have some very exciting things coming. As you may, or folks may have seen, there's been some recent press release announcements. Cloud DX was very successful in the last 6 months in receiving funding and government support for 3 very exciting projects. So we have a project that's being funded by something called the Next Gen Manufacturing Supercluster that's awarded Cloud DX $1.75 million. And that funding is going towards bringing to market our very newest blood pressure and breathing rate monitor. We have a device called PulseWave 2 that will be able to monitor people's blood pressure very accurately, but also their breathing rate. And that's very important for COVID patients, of course, so it's being fast-tracked because of that aspect of the device. We've also received funding through the Digital Technology Supercluster, along with our partner in Vancouver, Curatio, to deliver Stronger Together, which is a combination of our connected health system and Curatio's social network for patients and doctors. So it means even greater levels of connectivity between patients and their families and their care teams. So that project received $1.4 million in funding and is fast-tracked right now. It's very exciting. And then the third big announcement that just came out last week, Minister Baines mentioned that Cloud DX has received $300,000 from the Innovation Solutions Canada program. And that funding is helping us to optimize and reduce the cost of our Vitality Continuous Vital Sign Monitor, which is the next generation product that I think we showed you that actually monitors all your vital signs, including your blood pressure, continuously without any kind of cuff or anything, just as a simple wearable. And so the funding that we've received will help us bring the cost of that down and make it available to more and more people starting in 2021.
Robert, if people want to find out more information about Cloud DX, where can they go?
Well, please go to www.clouddx.com.
Awesome. Robert, thank you so much for your time today. These were excellent. You've given some great insight here. I do appreciate you sharing some of the benefits of where this monitoring patients at home can go. And I definitely am looking forward to the results of that study that you're doing with the Pink Master. So thank you for being on the program today.
Colin, thank you very much. We really appreciate your interest in Cloud DX.